Hey, hi everyone, this is Vivek, and today we're going to talk with Aruj in this first episode of Decoding the Code podcast, where we understand how does the mentality of a student who is in class 12 right now and is aiming for IOI works. So he has been fortunate and have got into this field quite early, and I feel there is a lot of things to understand in this perspective. How does this IOI world works in Indian ecosystem? What are the different tracks for students who are preparing for this computing Olympiad going beyond class 12? Because not a lot of JE and things like that make sense after doing so much of effort in competitive programming. What are the different things that he's interested in? Like, I think he has his own YouTube channel where he puts in a lot of interesting content. He has his own platform which he has built for speed training for competitive programming. There are a lot of interesting things, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation that we had. Let's move on to the conversation and understand all of these things in details. Stick till the end. Let's see you in the conversation. So, hi everyone, this is Vivek, and today we have with us Aruj Bansal. So, today we are going to talk about a lot of different things related to how competitive programming works in Indian community at school level. How does someone from school can go and do better in competitive programming? What are the different tracks look like? Even Aruj has his own YouTube channel, and he happens to teach a lot of interesting algorithms over there as well. So, we're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. Maybe we can start with an introduction, Aruj. Like, if you would like to introduce yourself quickly to the audience, that would be really great.
So hi everyone, I'm Aruj. I'm currently in grade 12 and I started competitive programming back in 10th grade. So right now I'm a silver medalist in the Indian National Olympiad in Informatics. And like Vivek said, I also have a YouTube channel. Apart from that, I also created this platform called CP Drills, which helps you improve your speed and measure your progress in competitive programming.
Great. So like, let's get started with how did you actually get started with competitive programming? Because in India, typically I see that not a lot of like school students really get into competitive programming, right? So what was that kickoff factor?
Yeah. So I think I'll start with how I got into programming and then move on to competitive programming. So I used to play this video game called Minecraft. Not sure if you've heard of it, but essentially you can create mods in it using Java. And that's how I actually found out about programming, because you can create mods with Java. And it was in 7th grade at that time. So I didn't really get started with Java, but I did a course on HTML and CSS. It's not exactly programming, but then that's when my interest started to develop. And then in 8th grade, I actually did a course on Java. I never got to making Minecraft mods, but I got interested in programming at that point. So then I just did courses in my summer vacation. Like in 8th grade, I did Java. I self-learned Python online that year. In 9th grade, I did Django, and I also did this summer program on AI. It was a basic program, just opening my eyes to AI. And in 9th grade, I participated in this hackathon. And that's when I found out about competitive programming, because they had this competitive programming event and a senior from my school was participating in it. So I just had like a one-off conversation with him, and that's how I got to know about it. And I would say like I got pretty lucky that I did get to know about it, because it's like super fun.
So I guess like you already had certain idea that okay, these fields do exist. I mean, not like a typical Indian family, if you think about it. Like not a lot of people generally get to know about even programming in their early stages in school, right? So you said that even your school had hackathons, and like you met a senior from your school itself. So I think most probably in your school also there is certain culture, like basic culture most probably, but there is a culture of people getting into programming and doing like competitive maybe.
Yeah, not exactly competitive programming, but we do have like a tech society. And there is a basic programming culture, I would say. People are aware of it, even if they don't actually do it.
Got it. So compared to your school, I think you might have seen a lot of other people as well who are, let's say, starting out in competitive programming in school or like are aspiring for the same. So what do you think like is the general scenario of schools in India? Like I think you would have a better picture of that.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think there's like a huge lack of awareness about competitive programming and just the Indian Computing Olympiad. And I think that's because, like, in schools particularly, there are Olympiads by Silver Zone Foundation. And then, school students never really find out about the Olympiad and competitive programming. I think people can find out about competitive programming if they know about the Olympiad. It'll be easier to get them to know about the Olympiad and then competitive programming. But there's just a huge lack of awareness. And also, I think some people just don't pursue it because they have to do JEE, because I think people who would like to pursue it, they'd be interested in computer science, and then they end up doing JEE, which doesn't leave them time to do this stuff.
Makes sense. I mean, like if you're getting into JEE, then that 11, 12 is kind of that time, which is actually a prime time if you're going to get into computer programming, is going to get into this engineering prep, right? Makes sense. In fact, in USA, like I have taught like 2-3 like privately tutored few school students in US for USAC altogether. So that's why I know that over there, there's this culture that in school itself you get like if you get to know, but a lot more people get to know about computer programming and they get started with that. And then like since there is this competition, which is like an aspiration for a lot of students over there, then that gets them rolled into this field and they kind of prepare pretty well. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, any suggestions that you have how I think in India that can be improved?
Yeah, so I think like earlier, the organizers of the Indian Computing Olympiad, they used to have an arrangement with the CBSE board, something related to promoting them, but that was stopped, I think, not sure why. But I think one big thing that would really help people to get to know about these Olympiads is more colleges and universities in India offering different pathways to admission through the Olympiad training camps. Like, for example, for the Indian Computing Olympiad, IIIT Hyderabad lets you skip JEE completely and just give an interview. And then there's also a Chennai Mathematical Institute, which offers direct admission. And recently, an IIT Gandhinagar has also started waiving its JEE requirement. So if more IITs also follow suit, then I think it could help spread a lot of awareness about this.
Yeah, it particularly makes sense for at least the computer science branch, where you can at least like even if not like completely a separate track, like if you have this seat allotted, like seat reserved for people who might get interviewed through this track, that kind of like motivates a lot of people. Makes sense. So like in general, like how do you think, like you have a lot more like idea about the INOI and IOI process that goes in India and how that follows. So based on your last year experience, like can you just elaborate a bit on like if let's say I'm a school student and I want to get like I'm someone who wants to get to IOI, right? So like what would be the general steps through which I will go and how would the scenario look like for me?
Yeah, so I think there are mainly 3 selection stages before you can go to the IOI. Essentially, in the starting, you have the zonal rounds. There's the zonal computing Olympiad and the zonal informatics Olympiad. And then you have the national Olympiad next. You can qualify for the nationals through either of the 2 zonal exams. But so basically, the zonal computing Olympiad is actual programming. You're allowed to use C++, Python, or Java, if I'm not mistaken. But the informatics Olympiad, it's more of a paper pen test. There is completely no programming involved, but it does have questions on like dynamic programming. So you have to do long calculations by hand, but it's basically there so that students who don't know about programming, they can still try to attempt the Olympiad. And then after the National Olympiad, they take about top 30 students from the National Olympiad. They get selected for the International Olympiad in Informatics Training Camp. And there you have team selection tests. And then the top 4 are chosen to represent India at the internationals. And if you also qualify for the training camp, then you get a chance to participate in the Asia Pacific Informatics Olympiad. And then how that works is the top 6 scorers from the country, they're chosen as official scores, and they're used to decide the rank list for the total Olympiad.
Okay, so in that sense, like if somebody, so one more thing I want to be clear about is, let's say if somebody like the way IIIT Hyderabad and like these colleges has some reservations, right? Like for people who are doing great in IOI or INOI. So what exactly is the criteria for theirs, like that particular slot? Like if somebody wants to get into that kind of criteria, what is exactly that?
So for like to have any benefit from the Olympiad, you have to reach the IOI training camp, which is top 30 from the National Olympiad.
And all those 30s are then eligible for this interview process and going forward.
Yeah. So like if you get an international medal, for example, I think IIT Gandhinagar specifically lets you choose which branch you want. Otherwise, you have to go through more selection if you just qualify for the training camp. But like reaching the training camp is baseline for getting all of these college benefits from it.
So what are your plans after 12th? Like, I mean, like right now you're in 12th grade, right? So
yeah, what are your plans? I'm applying to college abroad, and this is like primarily why I even had the time to do competitive programming in the first place, because they do holistic application reviews and it's not based on a single entrance exam. So yeah, that's like the major step in my life next. a college in the USA.
So like just a question that I'm curious about. So right now, so you don't really prepare, you're not really preparing anything about JEE and stuff right now, right? So like how does a typical day in your life look like? Like if you're not, like obviously there is some CP to that, but what the other things that you are doing right now typically on in a general day in your
Yeah,
life?
I'm not doing JEE, but then school academics become really important. And there are other standardized tests that you need to take for colleges abroad. Like there's this ACT and the SAT, which are very popular. So my day usually goes into there's a lot of studying now because so like there's the academic part of it, and then there's like building your profile for colleges abroad. And by the time you reach like this stage in 12th grade, it's mostly down to academics and writing your essays for the college applications. So my summer vacation just started, and now I'll have to see what my days will look like. But otherwise, it was just going to school, coming back a bit tired because COVID also just it went down, and then school went offline again. So then it was just coming back, sleeping maybe a bit, and then studying and just doing competitive programming, maybe things like that.
Got it. Just curious, your school is an international board or CBSE or like
ICSC.
ICSE, okay. So let's move into the next segment where we talk about, let's say, your YouTube channel. So I saw that you created a YouTube channel quite like early on, I think like a year back or something like that, right? And you have pretty good amount of like content on like some small topics that not a lot of people talk about, like parallel binary search or let's say persistent segmentary or things like that. So what exactly got you into creating content on YouTube, and like why you started on this one?
Yeah, so like when I was doing competitive programming, I actually really loved learning all of these data structures and algorithms. Like I know about leach out trees, which are used for the convex hull trick and things like that. And I didn't really care that I wouldn't need them at my level, but I just found them really fun to learn. But the thing was, they're like so less tutorials on those. So I just thought that maybe I can help people who want to learn these hard topics. Like I think when I made the convex hull trick video, there was only one other video on that on the entire YouTube, and then after that, videos started coming up on the particular topic. But the main idea initially was to choose topics that aren't covered much, like parallel binary search, persistent segment trees, convex hull trick. But then I think I also started making problem explanations for for the beginner contest. I just used to participate in them, so I thought, why not add them? And then in the end, I also wanted to sort of make a playlist on dynamic programming. I made one video. I never got to the rest of them, just because of time constraints. But I really want to do that because I think a lot of people struggle with dynamic programming because like a lot of videos explain dynamic programming to be sort of this formula-based thing. But I think like it's really a mindset where you have to think in the right way to be able to solve the problems.
Makes sense. I mean, that is exactly what one reason even I started off, because there's these like kind of good chunk of segments which I think nobody's really covering in CP, and that needs to be actually filled in. Makes sense. Correct.
Yeah.
And now I think you are more into preparations and stuff, so you might not be getting that much of time to create videos and all, right?
Yeah, right now I'm also not that much into competitive programming. Like I've taken a small break, but I will get into it again because I want to reach kind of like master before I graduate from school on code forces. So when I do find time, I will start getting back into it.
Let's talk about like your platform that you built, CP Drills. So that's also another like interesting like challenge that you kind of took on. So why did you started with CP Drills, and like maybe you can also tell the audience a bit about that, because not all of them might know about it. So maybe you can explain a bit, and what was your motivation creating CP Drills?
Yeah, so essentially like if you participate in code forces rounds, you'll see a lot of blog posts mention this term called speed forces. Essentially like there's a huge difficulty gap between problem C or D or something like that in a contest. And then the rank list is decided on the basis of speed for the first three problems. And then you see people solving the first problem at like the 1 minute mark. And I personally was like very slow. So it was initially like a personal project. It wasn't as polished as it is now. I used to like sort of get the graphs, etc., for myself to see how fast I was. But then, later I had my winter vacation, and that's when I really expanded it and opened it up. So essentially, CP Drills is like this speed training platform where you can get problems from code forces. It has all of the tags that code forces has, plus you can filter using contest types like Division 2, Division 1, educational rounds. And then it gives you exactly one problem of a particular rating. You solve it against a stopwatch, and then when you save your progress, it adds it to your graphs. So there are graphs for the variation of your time taken from rating to rating, and then per rating, how it varies from month to month. And that's essentially the whole idea behind CP drills.
So essentially, it's like a speed training altogether. Like when you are track your progress as well as speed training, because I think this can be actually a very great add-on if like someday Codeforces starts to build this. I mean, there are few Chrome extensions which actually allow you to get some of these datas, but I think like a lot of work like this can be done even like directly in Codeforces altogether, right?
Yeah, I mean, I found it pretty surprising that it isn't talked about as much. There's always a conversation about solving harder problems, but not solving the ones you can solve faster, because you can become a candidate master by solving the 3 problems very fast instead of solving 4 slowly.
Absolutely.
So I think it's this area that's less touched upon.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like you can solve a problem and then how fast you can, like every like I think Olympiad can have a speed version to it, right? Like I mean, speed forces, like every kind of such challenging problem solving stuff can have a speed version to it, and training the speed is something that I think nobody talks about. True.
Yeah.
So where do you see as the future of this? Like, are you like planning on to building more features or like integrating few more things onto the platform itself?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when, but when I initially built CPDs, I really wanted to have some machine learning to actually recommend problems instead of just randomly picking them from Codeforces. So, I mean, I have a lot more data now, and whenever I get time in the future, I will probably look at implementing that. But later in college, I think maybe I might make it an online judge in itself, where it has its own problems instead of picking from Codeforces, and maybe more educational problems as well.
Got it. So essentially what I see is it can become like an AI trainer altogether, like which trains someone altogether in this competitive programming domain, be it speed training, be it topic training, be it, let's say, like in general mixed practice or things like that. Let's say, so essentially if somebody wants to go to like get ranks and ratings, they go to Codeforces, and then when they want to practice, they come to CP drill. That's how it can be almost, right?
Yeah, like that'd be like the best case scenario that happens there.
Makes sense. Yeah, one last question that I have for you is like anyone who we invite on this podcast, we ask them that there is like one of their favorite resources that they have for competitive programming. Because personally, even I like used to like like whenever I was doing competitive programming, I used to get a lot of resources and bookmark them and save like this is a really good resource and things like this. So what would be that one favorite resource that you feel is quite underrated and not a lot of people follow, but they should get more visibility such?
So I think this is, a lot of people don't know about this because it's relatively new, but it would be Codeforces EDU for me. So if you go to codeforces.com, there is EDU tab at the top, and I think it has tutorials on 5 topics right now: suffix arrays, binary search, 2 pointers, union find, and I think one more. But I think it's really good because it has video explanations. It has the same thing in a text format, and then it gives you so many practice problems on it. And I think like that completeness is missing from all other guides. Even though CF EDU has less topics, I think for those particular topics, it's like a really good guide. And again, it's not mentioned in many different tutorials or other things because I think it was created last year only, so it's relatively new.
Yeah, I think main reason I feel is like it doesn't really cover a lot of basic topics or like things like deep. As soon I think once DP or things like that might like come into edu of Codeforces, we are going to see like a lot of people flocking into that. But yeah, makes sense. I mean, even I have seen the suffix arrays contest as well, like gradually increasing and seeing a lot of different applications in that one playlist is like really interesting. That's something true. Segment tree is also really good. Like I think they have segment tree as well now. So
they have like 4 different problem sets for segment trees. So that's where I learned segment trees from. There are so many problems on counting inversions, counted nested ranges and things like that. So it's a really good problem set.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, like I see like most of the content that gets created is mostly for competitions, and then people use that for educational purposes, whereas there is a difference between creating content for educational purposes directly, because then you want to make them teach the core ideas and retain the idea altogether. So that essentially solves the problem, right?
Yeah,
I think one more resource which is very parallel to that is I think USECO guide, which I think has also like pretty good like collection of a lot of topics and some problems, though it's problems are specific to USACO on a large basis, but yeah, I mean that also like covers some of these, right?
Yeah, I think like particularly for Codeforces, the topics order in USECO guide might not be the best, but for every topic, I think it has a really good collection of problems and tutorials to learn from.
It was great talking to you. I think I in fact got a lot of perspective on how actually like this school version of this computer programming work, because personally I started out computer programming once I got to college. So, and very honestly, I didn't really had any context of computer programming when I was in school. So it's great
yeah, I wouldn't have started with competitive programming either, because like when I found out about it in ninth grade, and I got back to my house and I showed it to my dad, and he had initial thought, they were very complicated problems on code forces. I think I opened up some H from some global round and I showed it to him, and he thought that it was for college kids, or it wasn't to be done in school. So then I left it for 6 months, but then I was interested in it, so I got back to it, and then I realized that there's this whole Olympiad about it and things like that. And that's when I got into it.
So it was great talking to you, Aruj. I guess this is the place where we'll stop. I think a lot of audience would also be like happy to kind of see like more content that you have on the YouTube channel. So I will be linking Aruj's YouTube channel onto the description. Go ahead and like subscribe to that for sure, and check out the CP Tools platform. I think that is also very well built if you want to practice on a speed, like as Aruj said, almost like a speed forces to that. So that's, I guess, all. Any other final note, Aruj, for the audience that we have right now?
Yeah, there's one thing I would like to mention. Like when you're actually doing competitive programming, you should focus on like the journey itself and not on every contest. Because I've realized that when you don't perform well in a contest, it's very demotivating. But if you like enjoy learning new things and then just solving problems, then you can continue doing CP. Because like I think I was stuck at green at the pupil range in code forces for like 8 months, but I didn't give up, and then I eventually did become blue on code forces. So it's very important to like remember that why you're doing CP.
Thanks, Aruj. Thanks for taking all the time. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
So if you enjoyed this particular conversation, do hit a like and subscribe to the channel, and make sure that you share with people or maybe school students who would be interested in these kind of fields, so that they are aware about this kind of opportunities, see what their peers are actually into and how they can kind of navigate through their journey. Now, this particular video will also be continued with next podcast where we will have more such guests. So if you have someone in mind whom you want to listen to these kind of conversations and understand their journey, make sure to recommend them to like kind of go to the YouTube and like maybe reach out to me if they want to be a guest, or even you can just name them in below with their LinkedIn profile, and I'm going to reach out to them directly. So that's all for this particular podcast. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.